Welcome back, episode 120 of the Grouch of the Brainstorm. I'm Mike, and I am joined today with Matt.
Hey, everybody.
And Cal.
What's up, what's up?
And a noticeably absent Jill.
Seat is empty over there.
There's no one here in the hot seat.
Poor Jill.
No one to use those huge words that we are normally
Yeah, I didn't even bring my dictionary today.
normally accustomed to hearing. So I brought my thesaurus Rex so I could translate the words, and I realized that Jill is on holiday. That's
Yeah.
what we call it here in the Southern Europe.
Yeah.
She's on holiday in North Carolina.
Yeah.
Hopefully getting a lot of sun.
Yes.
Hopefully.
Well, if you're anywhere in the South right now, you're getting a daggum lot of sun. I can
Hopefully
promise you.
she is getting a lot of sun. And I'm going to straighten Matt's camera up just there. Look at that. Matt's right back in the
Beautiful,
middle. You know,
beautiful.
surprising, man. I was on my way over here, and I left Dallas 4 hours ago, and it's 85 degrees, pouring down torrential rain, right? Just torrential. I mean, flooding. And 85 degrees. And here I am, 185, 200 miles away, and it's like 95 degrees and the sun shining. I went from one complete extreme to a whole nother in just a little stretch of highway, and thank goodness, you know, those folks down in South Texas have just been hammered
Man.
with some stuff lately. Just flooded, rivers overflowed. I think it's down around
I
Kerrville.
tubed on that river when I was in high school, the Guadalupe, and man, I saw the news of it, and I was like, oh my God.
Man.
You can't even recognize it. You
Man,
know?
it is it's some bad stuff.
Yeah.
So I'm glad to see y'all got some sun here, you know, and hopefully Jill's getting some sun wherever she is, and definitely notice the absence, and that's okay.
Yeah.
That's okay.
Yeah.
She deserves
She needs a good break.
we gave her a paid vacation from the
Yeah.
podcast.
Her check's waiting when she gets
So
back.
this is her first paid vacation from the podcast. So she'll still be in the credits that roll at the end of this thing.
Yes, she should be, and she'll have some more big words when she gets back.
Now, hopefully she'll learn some more big words.
I had a listener reach out last week on Instagram. His name is Jason. I'm not going to share his last name. I don't know if he wants me to or not. But he was like, "Hey man, I got to ask you something. Do y'all really not have air conditioning in that studio?" And I said, "No, we have it. We just can't use it during the podcast." So.
Yeah, unfortunately, the software we have does not, and these aren't the most sensitive microphones that you can get. I own two more at the house, and they pick up just everything. So after the podcast, you have to go in and run about 3 filters in order to get out all the little unnecessary sounds. And with these, it's just one. And depending on how in a hurry I am, right, sometimes I don't even filter it. I just kind of have to release it so that we have something that week. So, Cal, hadn't seen you in a week. How are you? How you been?
I'm doing well, Mike. Thanks for asking.
You sound great, man. Love the microphone.
It's your microphone, man. Thank you. I appreciate it.
So I've had feedback over the past 3 months on my audio. Jill and Matt apparently working great, but I've had feedback on my audio. And so I decided to add an extra microphone to me and to Cal today, just to see, you know. So mine is on the microphone itself, and then Cal's is on his lapel. Lapel? What's a lapel? I don't even know what a lapel is. It's on his shirt.
It's on the little shirt.
The shirt.
The shirt.
So, Cal, you been up to anything new, man?
No, man. I'm just appreciative being here. You guys invited me, but I do what you was discussing earlier. I do want to send out my heart and condolences to those loved ones, those people who have lost people, and it's just unfortunate. So many kids that had their whole lives ahead of them, and that it really hurt, you know.
Yeah.
And I really hope that people in America can put their differences aside and their beliefs and whatever political affiliation, and just try to come together around those people and
For sure.
you know, console them. That's about it.
I think we normally, man, as a country, and it being July 4th, we normally on a disaster, not always, but normally those type things, we tend to come together pretty good for the most part, you know.
Yeah.
and everybody pitches in. That
Yes.
stuff, it's tough. But
And it's an unfortunate, sad situation, and I guess unexpected things happen.
Yeah.
They really do. Matt, what have you been up to?
man, 4th of July, we had fireworks. Cal brought about $20,000 worth of fireworks to
Yeah.
our pasture, and
It's a good
you know,
Louisiana thing to do.
oh man, it was like World War III or IV out there. Him and Chris C. And then the boys, the teenagers, were all that's egging it on right there too. But they popped all those the other night. That was a lot of fun. We kind of got together and that's it, man. Just cutting grass this time of year. That's about all I'm doing. So it was a nice little break. So
The grass ought to be growing pretty good here
it
shortly.
is not stopping. It's been cranking. We're getting that perfect weather down here where we get one heavy storm about once a week for about 4 hours, and it just floods everything. And then the rest of the week, it's sunshiny, 90 in the 90s, and grass just goes nuts.
Oh yeah,
So,
man. Humidity goes nuts. Grass
yeah,
goes
it
nuts.
goes
Everything
nuts, man.
just seems
So
to go nuts.
It has done that all year so far, and normally this time of year you'd start to see stuff start to drying up and thinning out. It is rocking right now. So, but that's job security, I guess.
Yeah. Well, man, I haven't done anything really. I've just worked every day probably since the last time I've seen, I know I have, since the last time I've seen you guys. I've got my grandson, Everest, the one that's in the hospital and has been for a long time. It looks like he's got about 1 more month in the hospital, and then they're going to bring him over here, and he's going to have a hernia surgery of all things. He's got a hernia, which is, that's nothing to this kid.
Yeah.
He's got... And so they're going to go ahead and operate on that, patch him up, and then once he has the healing time, they're going to ship him back over, and he'll be here right down the road, in the care of his mother, father, and then they got 3 nurses that round the clock. So
My mother, I was on the phone with my mom the other day, and she was asking about him and about you, and I said I think he's getting ready to come home.
Mm-hmm.
But the question I had, he's been basically in the hospital since he was born. Correct?
he's never left hospital.
And
no.
how old is he now?
Well, Tuesday he will be 1 year old.
Okay, I knew it was.
Yeah.
That's what I told her. I said I think it's around a year. He's got to be getting close to a year. So
And we never thought that he would make.
I remember that.
We didn't
Yep.
think he would make 3 months.
Yep.
I remember conversations with his mother asking me to come up to the hospital. I need you to come up here this week and visit him. And you could tell the reasoning behind that was, and God is my higher power. I call God is no matter what that situation had turned out, that situation is going to turn out the way it's supposed to turn out. And a lot of that acceptance that we learn about in Alcoholics Anonymous comes into play when you're in those situations and you realize there's absolutely nothing I can do. Yeah. So, my prayers always consisted of your will be done and have strength over my daughter and her husband and anyone else, and more or less just whatever happens. And no matter what, all glory goes to God. And and here we are a year later, though. You go in that hospital room and when you open the door, besides the tube sticking out and all these, machines and he looks like a normal 1-year-old boy. Yeah. He's got a couple of physical deformities because of his back, his spine, the way it's shaped, and that's one of the first things they fix when he gets to Philadelphia. And so, but besides that, he rolls over. He tries to get out of his cage or whatever. How when you roll the sides up on a baby bed, he tries to get out of that thing, and just a normal little.
Yeah, that's
he needs a
normal.
haircut.
Yeah.
He's just a normal little redheaded kid that, somehow by the grace of God. They used to tell her in the very beginning, because she always asked them, and I can imagine it's almost as hard for them, right? But she would always ask them, is he going to make it? Are you saying he's not going to make it? Is he going? And they always kept saying, well, that's up to him. And that's kind of a, to a young mother, that's a, you don't want to hear that.
Unsettling.
Yeah, you don't want to hear. But he don't know anything's wrong with him. He doesn't realize he hasn't left the hospital. He got a first class trip in the middle of the night from Shreveport to Dallas on some kind of big old medical jet that they have. I didn't even know existed, but they loaded him up at like 11, 12 o'clock at night and flew him over there, landed at Love Field, which is right down the road from the Dallas Children's, and then shuffled him on over. And he's been in 3 or 4 different rooms, and just and some of the amazing stuff you see, and also going and visiting him. I can honestly say there's a lot of heartbreaking things you see in that facility, right? But hey, we'll see. He's going to turn a year old.
That's
Probably
awesome.
not going to have a huge party, but
Yeah.
maybe we did have a big one for his sister, my granddaughter, who turned 3 last month, the end of last month. She's usually about 3 days after my sobriety date. So anyway, a lot of the stuff we had talked about in the podcast before the podcast, where we're getting our headphones ready and doing our stretching calisthenics and getting all of the thought processes going, was a subject that I first heard. Now, we have unassigned seating in AA. So if you walk in an AA meeting, you can sit anywhere you want. Matter of fact, you may not, but I know Cal will know this. My very first time at the Koala Club, Cal, I walked in and I sat in Woodrow's seat. Woodrow. Now, if anybody knows Woodrow, he could be a little ornery, and he reserved the right to be ornery. But deep down inside, he's a wonderful man. Okay. And but I sat in Woodrow's seat, and he just didn't happen to be there that day, right? So the very next day, I came in, and Woodrow was sitting in his seat. And so I sat in the seat to the right of Woodrow, which was almost as bad as sitting in Woodrow's seat, because this dude, he kind of gives you a little bit of hell.
Stared you down.
He gives you a little bit of hell, and but we have unassigned seating. And so after a couple days, I didn't want to be sitting by an old timer, and so I sit in the middle, right? Because they always called on Woodrow, and then how about that guy next to you? I'd wear dark clothes, I didn't want to bring any attention. I'd hide behind that pole right there by Woodrow, right? And so I sat in the middle, and the only person I can think of that may even sit in that area now would be Jenny with an I. You know what I'm talking about? She sits there every once in a while, but I sat right there, and there was this guy, and he did chips every day, 7 days a week at the 5:30. Back then, we had a 5:30 every day. There wasn't a big book study. There wasn't the step study. None of that, right? We had a promises meeting on Wednesday and the other times, but he was there 7 days a week, and he did chips, and his name was Colonel Jim. And a lot of folks don't remember Colonel Jim, and it's a strange story when it comes to Colonel Jim. But I sat there in the middle, and I felt like Colonel Jim was staring at me at all times. I felt like when I go to the bathroom, he'd stare at me, and when I would go to anywhere, I felt like I go to the coffee pot, I felt like Colonel Jim was just staring at me. And so I moved after about 3 days of Colonel's. He sat in the middle where the chairperson sits now, right? And the chairperson sat down on the end where Rod would be sitting at a 5:30. And so I moved up behind Colonel Jim to the chair that I currently sit in almost every time, right?
All right.
And over the years, me and Colonel Jim would become really good friends. And I realized the dude wasn't stairs. It was me. It wasn't had nothing to do with Colonel Jim. But he used to always say that he got into AA and he realized that he had a God-sized hole. Pretty big hole, right? But what he was talking about, in the beginning, I didn't understand that. What does this mean? He has a God-sized hole. And what he was talking about was he had a void inside of what I guess I would call a soul, maybe. There was something missing, and the only thing that could fill that void was God, or a spiritual life, or something other than the selfishness that was in that void. And And so we got into AA, and he also used to say this thing. I used to have to do the math where a man takes a drink takes a drink, and a drink takes the man. You ever heard that one? Mm-hmm. And I would have to, I'm talking about 7, 8 years. I would have to put that together in my head over and over again, figure out what the was he talking about, you know? But when he would talk about that God-sized hole, and I heard other people say it, you know, and you got to remember, I'm new in this time. So I'm thinking, you know, well, he's got a God-sized hole. I got a drinking problem. You know, he's got a God-sized hole. I've just got a drinking problem. I don't have nothing else but a drinking problem. You know, I'm glad you got a God-sized hole filled. And later on down the line, Colonel Jim, due to health reasons, stopped coming to the 5:30, and he started going to the noon. And he would come by and visit me at the grocery store when I was working there, and we'd talk after the noon every day, and we caught up. And I didn't hear from him for many, many years, 8 or 9 years maybe. I didn't talk to Jim. I had moved a couple times, and one night I called Dana, and I said, "Hey, how is Colonel Jim? Has anybody heard anything or talked to him?" "Oh, I talked to his wife the other day. He's doing fine." The next morning, she texted me and said, "Colonel Jim passed away last night." That is just strange, right? And so I don't ask how anyone's doing now.
Never ask about me, Mike.
But great man. He was just an absolutely wonderful man, and he always talked about that God-sized hole. And, you know, Matt, and I think about myself a lot, obviously, but I think about me and the life I have today, right? And the life I had then and what was missing, right? And I call myself a spiritual person. I prayed a lot, even when I was in my cups. I had this all-time, lifetime belief in God. Never would I doubt God. Bad things happen, good things happen, whatever it was. My faith would never waver. So I felt like I even had a personal relationship with God, right? But yet, I never was happy. I was never happy with anything. I wasn't happy with my children. I wasn't happy with my wife at the time. I wasn't happy with my job. I wasn't happy with the vehicle I had. I wasn't happy with my hair. Back then, had hair. I wasn't happy with my body or my clothes. I wasn't happy with anything. But yet, here it was. I didn't understand that you could have a relationship with God, and as long as that relationship with God was okay, and anything you call God or whatever it is you believe in, anything, but as long as that relationship was okay, and you did a certain few things to keep that thing healthy, that life could become satisfying even if some of those things aren't. Right? I wake up today, every day, I'm not happy with something, Cal. I'm just not. I'm not happy with my truck. I'm not happy with my laptop. I'm not happy with my people. You know what I mean? But yet, me, I'm a happy dude. I'm okay, right? And so there's a couple of things there. There's the God-sized hole, and Matt, what you think, and Cal, and then there's the what do you do to cope with things as they come along, and then how does it relate with your higher power? What do you think?
Okay.
That's your cue, man.
That's my cue.
That's
okay. Usually it's like a stick or whatever they hit.
Well, I can play this song.
There you go. That's playing my theme song.
Well, recently started harmonica practice and
you know,
do my own sounds.
I mean, I'm gonna go off, Mike, what you were saying. I grew up as a pastor's kid, so I was in church my whole life, and I had knowledge of all that stuff. I believed that it was real. I just didn't have the relationship myself with what everybody was telling me, you know. And it took coming in here, I realized that the drugs and the alcohol and all those things, I was like you, I was unhappy with everything. My truck, my kids, my wife, my, family, everything was a problem. The red light I'm sitting at. And what I figured out was the problem was I was unhappy with me. So when I got that started working on that, those other things cleared up a lot. I was able to, that stuff doesn't bother me as much when I'm spiritually fit, because I realized it was me that I was unhappy with, didn't want to, you know, and I did have that hole to where I thought, well, drugs, alcohol, all those things will go in there, and then that'll kind of calm a lot of that thinking down. And I don't have, it was a way to put a Band-Aid on something, but then the Band-Aid was ripped off as soon as that stuff wore off or whatever it might be, and I was right back again. And that to me was the solution for a long time. And it was like, well, I guess this is what I do. You know, I can deal with life and the way things are if I have this Band-Aid to put on me. And you know, it took going into Alcoholics Anonymous and being a pastor's kid. You would think, man, you'd run right to church and find a minister and all that stuff. And I didn't. I came in and I had to find it on my own. And people went, well, it's up to you to find it. And I went, well, wait a minute. At church, they told me, here it is. This is what it is. You don't have to find it. We're going to give it to you. This is God right here. And for whatever reason, that never clicked with me. And so when I started having to pray about things, to try to have a relationship with a higher power, to do all that stuff, I actually developed a relationship. And so that's what I lean on when things are tough. And I know that God's there. And after, you know, a few years of doing this, that becomes a practice, and it's taking the place of that Band-Aid. So I don't have that ripped away right back to square one constantly that I used to feel. And it always gets me to come in, and you work with guys and a guy goes, I don't have any issues. I just like to drink. I just like to get effed up. And it's like, no, there's something there, you know, and we all know that as we've come in, and there's a background to that. And so that's kind of been my experience with it, you know, is like Alcoholics Anonymous taught me how to find it for myself. And that was the key for me, you know? So I don't know if Cal, what he thinks about all that, but.
I don't know. You know, it's crazy, man, because I just like stopped myself from getting emotional a little bit, you know, like because when you talk about that, I'm thinking about a lot of the stuff that I wasn't privy to as a child, and it created a hole in my life. Me searching for, you know, maybe a parent that I should have had or what I expected, you know, love that I should have expected. I should have had a childhood that was a little bit more
Loving, nurturing.
Yeah, and me being able to be more of a child, you know, and I grew up looking for stuff to, I guess, fill the void that I had in that area, and it just enhanced itself. And I think I know what I did was I took matters into my own hand. Yeah, I grew up in church and whatnot, and I think that was more forced than anything. Mm-hmm. But what I did was I totally shifted my thought process, and I started to beat myself up, meaning physically. And that's where I took it. I really, you might not be able to tell now, but I used to be in great shape for a long time. And that's what I did. That was my outlet. I just beat myself into a pulp to where I couldn't think of things. Meaning, I would go to the gym for hours at a time, you know, and just get to the point where I'm numb physically, you know, and exhausted to where I couldn't think of things. And naturally, you know, that didn't work because I got really in really good shape. So it would shift to other things, you know, whether that was, you know, finding love, it was fabricated love, or whether that was with women, a plethora of women, you know, seeing if I could get this girl or that girl and being promiscuous, whether that was drugs and alcohol. And I think ultimately that was earlier on me going through the process of figuring out how to love myself, you know, and provide myself with self-love. Because if you think about the process of love in general, as a child, right, my love is geared towards my mom. As I get older, my love is geared towards my siblings, my my cousins, whatever the case may be, my friends, as I become an adolescent that's geared towards my first love, girlfriend at the time. For ladies, it's their boyfriend or whatever the case may be. And as I become an adult, then it's my girlfriend, my fiance, whatever. I have a child. It's my child. At no point in that process did I say myself. I'm giving all this love outside, but nothing is coming back in. Mm-hmm. And I think a lot of people experience that. So I think a lot of that hole was the lack of love that I thought I should have received from earlier on that wasn't provided.
Did you think you didn't receive it, or do you think you weren't worthy of, like, blew it off or ignored? You know what I mean?
I know my parents loved me, but it was the way in which it was shown. You know, I know my parents went through a lot of crap, and now I've gotten to a point where I know they did the best that they could,
yeah,
you know, with what they had. But for the bulk of my life, I didn't think that or harbored those emotions, knowing that they were involved in this, that, and the other. And it took away from their ability to be able to do certain things for me.
Gotcha.
You know, as a child. So I really resented them for that. And it wasn't until I started going, I'm telling you, up until this program, where I really started to realize that, because I got to a point where I didn't know the difference between being lonely and being alone. And I always wanted to fill that gap as well. And it wasn't until I came into this program and watched that you guys are actually doing good. You're happy. You know, you're able to give out love, and you're clearly in love with yourself. Not to a point where you're vain, you know, and it's all about you, but you couldn't love me properly if you weren't able to love yourself. And when I started to immerse myself into the thought process of this group is when I started to see that somebody is doing something for you that you can't do for yourself. And I wanted a piece of that. And I think I began to control things that obviously I could not control, but I wanted to. And when I started to relinquish that by way of allowing myself to be led by another man, then it allowed me to be more open to develop a relationship with a God of my understanding. And that hole that you talked about, that void, began to fill naturally without me even knowing, you know. But I began to understand now, you know, I could love myself a little bit. I could take it easier on myself, not be too harsh.
Well, and I think we learn, and you and I, that same man you're talking about, we both are sponsored by that same guy. And so we've kind of been through the same process there. And, you know, I think we realize early on in that process, we start to forgive others first.
Yeah.
And go, you know what, they're not perfect. God made everybody. And then somewhere along the line it clicks and goes, wait a minute, God made me too. I'm not perfect either. I'm trying to work on things. And that's where that kind of catch your breath moment happens. And you go, okay, well, at least I know I'm working to get better at this. I've done a few little things to start. And that's where that kind of starts. And it's like, man, when we realize number one, we feel, or I felt, you know, like I'm just this horrible person, and I had a lot of things and a lot of flaws, but at the same time, I had to realize that we all do, you know, and everyone does, and we all have to work on that. And when I was able to feel like I was starting to work on those things, I was able to kind of go, okay, I see where I'm at, you know.
Yeah.
So
I was running from a lot of stuff, man, you know, and that's why I think I turned more towards drugs and alcohol too. And being in the military really didn't help much because of all the stuff that I saw. So it just exacerbated the issue, you know. And I really thank God for this program, man, because I don't think I would have ever been able to embrace the situation and what I was running from if I wouldn't have accepted another way. You know, I know I wouldn't have been able to.
And I think we kind of experienced the same thing, because I came in from a religious background and being told so much all my life, and I got in my adult life and I was like, I don't want nothing to do with all that. And I didn't. And then I come in, and the thing that got me about Alcoholics Anonymous was real. People were real. They were very open about good, bad, or indifferent. It didn't matter. And I'd be talking to some guy, and they just go, oh, yeah, I remember I went to jail for so-and-so. And I'm like, what? And this guy disappears to be, and you find out he's like, oh yeah, I did this, this, and this, and I ran around on my wife, and I got a divorce, and God bless her. And I'm thinking nobody says that about their ex-wife, and they're like, and then I hear all these things, and I'm like, these people actually have something here. Like they've figured out life and how to, and their attitudes on all that stuff was so awesome. And I knew I'd found my people. So.
And you say attitude, and I mean that's a big one. I mean, my attitude anyway was it really went from being like super egotistical, which the whole nother topic would be the when we talk about the guy that has a what is it, an egomaniac with an inferiority complex.
Yeah.
But that's pretty much describes me. It went from being super like that. Then, obviously the drinking got way out of hand. You lose everything. You still hang on to that false pride. And then your health starts to decline faster than you want it to, and you're like, wow, I'm going to die. My kids aren't talking to me. So then you have I had a realization, then I got really scared, right? And then after I got scared, I kind of worked through these steps of AA, and that actually gathered it kind of took back a little bit of me caring about myself, because if I didn't take care of myself, I was going to go back to the guy I used to be. But I had to take care of myself in a different way. Taking care of myself now consisted of daily prayer, right? Mm-hmm. Talking to another alcoholic whenever something was going on. When I needed to cry. Don't not cry just because I'm a man or whatever, all of these things. And so I start taking myself in a different way, taking care of myself. I actually, like before, I felt like taking care of yourself was a boat. Right? You go buy a boat, and that way you can go fishing. And then, you go fishing, you can get away from everybody, and everybody is the problem. Hey, I buy a boat, I solve the problem. But then you run into a whole nother problem. Where do I put the boat? Well, I got to go get a sticker for this lake? I mean, it's just so a whole different kind of self-care.
Yeah.
And I tell you what, I used to pray and hope God heard my prayers or hope God answered my prayers, right? But it was a whole different kind of prayer, Let me get this position, let me get this girl, or hey, I just went and tried to get this car, let this go through, Lord. I mean, nothing that has to do. I know for a fact now God answers my prayers. You know what? Because I don't pray for anything. I don't ask for stuff, right? Whenever I pray, I just your will be done. You take it, whatever happens. I pray that I don't take it back, because when I take it back, it becomes an emotional mess for me that I don't have any control over. So, a little bit of difference in the way I think now as far as but all that started with an attitude, and that attitude did not change overnight.
So what I will say is that before the program, the one thing I am grateful for, I think we've all had our experiences with going to some type of facility to help us out along the way.
Yeah.
And for me, in my situation, I went to Laurel Ridge in San Antonio. I spent 147 days there. So it's been a long time.
Is that a military facility?
Yeah.
Okay.
And they work through childhood trauma and military trauma, and I was very reluctant to do anything. I was very abrasive at first, but the one thing I took away from that was the PET, the prolonged engagement therapy, and that was basically me just sitting down with a therapist and talking. And I think that was the start, before I even came into this program, of me trying to work to fill a void that was missing.
Yeah.
And then when I got into this program, I think this is very imperative for those who are contemplating going or in the process right now going through steps. When I really started to see that impact of filling a void that was missing, was when I sat down and actually listened to my sponsor and started writing stuff down. So that fourth step is so, I would argue to say, obviously, finding a God of your own understanding is very important. But when you get to that point and you're able to write it down, read it, conceptualize it, retain it, and be able to talk about it, I think that's when you start to find a breakthrough in this program. I think that step, if you don't do any, you got obviously you got to do it all, but take that so serious because, I mean, obviously you're gonna have stuff to add on and as you continue on, but initially, when you get to that step, do it, and don't be afraid of it. Don't be afraid of yourself or what you've done because that is gonna start to refill that void that has been keeping you down for years.
I have a friend that has brought that up, and he's like, I'm not doing it. I'm not telling all my stuff. And I said, then tell a couple of them. Tell a few. Try that. Try it. Just start on it. You can always go back. But I said, look and see what the result is of writing down a few things and going through them with your sponsor. No, give it an attempt, man. Like it's a game changer, But yeah, I was looking through today, was looking for a sponsee. If you guys ever need a good sponsor, if you like jail, just ask me because most of my guys go to jail. That's what they do. But I was looking for a guy today, and he's in jail. And I was looking through the jail inmate list, and there was 5 people. I looked through half the not even half. 5 people that have been affiliated with our area here, group in one way or another, that are currently in jail, and they're all for possession, all the things that we do, theft, and there's that we will constantly, I guess it was a good reminder, we will constantly, to whatever cost it is, find those substances to put in our body to fill that hole, but we won't sit and listen to some folks and take a couple suggestions. We'll go steal stuff from people, we'll rob, we'll do whatever, high speed chases, whatever it might be, and it always confuses me, when I see that stuff, and it just concerns me that there's just a better way to do it,
You're right, man. I really think it's just a lot of people aren't used to having people to talk to begin with, especially if you're in that state of mind and like we all were. I mean, it's just, you don't have anyone to turn to. And the only time you do turn to someone is when you're actually inebriated, and that's when your mouth just runs like a leaky faucet.
Boy, it does.
Yeah. So, I mean, I get it. Like, it's just, it's so hard for people because it was hard for me to just sit down and be like, yo, do I want to tell this dude what's going on?
Yeah.
Do I really want to disclose this information? Because for some odd reason in my mind, I'm thinking that person isn't capable of doing worse than what I've done. Mm-hmm. And then another thing I want for you guys who are sponsoring, man, it's imperative to build that trust with your sponsee as well and let them know some things that, you got to let them know some things so you can get them comfortable. Mm-hmm. I had to tell some of my sponsees some of the stuff that I talked to with my sponsor, to get them to open up, to let them know it's a two-way street. Now, I done told you this stuff, I expect your trust.
Yeah.
Now, you can tell me something, and
yeah.
For a fact that, you can trust me now,
Yeah.
That helps.
I think that trust, what else I noticed in Alcoholics Anonymous, and you were talking about the therapist and talking to the therapist, what I noticed in there, people actually listened. They just listened. Yeah. There wasn't a lot of advice. It wasn't a lot of like, well, let me tell you now what you need to do. No. People just would sit and quietly listen. And then some of them, you word vomit for 10 minutes, and then they go, damn, that sucks. Yeah. And I felt better. They didn't do anything. All they did was take their time and actually focus and listen to what somebody was saying. And I found that in AA where I didn't find that outside. People just, they're self-absorbed and they have their own agenda. And that was a big thing for me. It was just people that would listen. And not even a sponsor, just folks in there that I know,
Mm-hmm.
So.
What else is awkward too, man, is that every other entity in life outside of AA, if I'm going to do this, you're expected to do something for me, or for me rather. Like even therapists, all right, they're great. I assume so. You know, some may not be, but I still have to give you something in order to get something in return, and it's usually monetary.
Yeah.
In our program, that the people can't seem to understand that you're willing to dedicate your entire time away from your family, away from your job, but you're setting aside time for me, and you're not expecting me to do anything in return, but to just take the suggestions,
Yeah.
and get your life better.
Yeah.
People aren't willing to naturally, accept that because it doesn't happen in life. So that's the hardest thing I think too for people to do is just say, damn, these people really do care. I've never had that.
That's a man perfect. I mean, I couldn't have, my first sponsor, his name was Dale, and Dale passed away when I was about 14, 15 months sober, somewhere in there. And he was a pharmacist for the city of Shreveport, I believe. He worked in some kind of office downtown, and he was the guy that got to the meeting every day, like at 5:40. He was 10 minutes late every day. Anyway, I picked him to be my sponsor just because I felt like he was almost like a dad figure to me, And you got to remember, I was only 38 when I got there, and Dale died when he was 57, which is only 5 years older than I am now.
Yeah.
But anyway, he would say, "Hey, here's the deal." He worked Monday through Friday, like 8 to 5, something like that, right?
Yeah.
At this said pharmacy, and then he would say, "How about you meet me at the Koala Club every Saturday morning at 9 a.m." And I would, okay, I'll meet you at the Koala Club Saturday morning, 9 a.m. And I never could figure out. The guy works all week. Saturday morning, I found out later, was actually when he played golf every week with his golf partner.
Yeah.
And this guy, I couldn't figure out what the deal was. Why are you willing to spend these kind of hours with me, right? It just didn't make any sense. Like, I'm not paying him. I'm not nothing, and of course he gave me the whole spiel. By the way, when my dad used to have to spank me when I was a kid, I used to always get the whole, this is going to hurt me a whole lot more than it's going to hurt you bit.
Bullcrap.
Well, when Dale would say, this is helping me more than it's helping you, or you're helping me more, I was kind of like the same thing. Yeah, sure, whatever, right? Yeah. And I didn't buy all that stuff he was spitting out, but I never, and then he never asked for anything. Matter of fact, the guy never even asked me not to drink. Like, it was never he didn't even say, did you drink today, or have you thought about it? Drinking never even came up. He was just like, here, I'm going to give you this, my time, and my little bit of education. He had like 18 years of my little bit of education, and I'm going to spend that with you, and let's see, and when I'm done, and if you're still sober, when we're done with the steps, and you can go do that with another person, then that's what I want you to do. And I just thought that was so weird. Mm-hmm. Just, why?
Where's the angle?
Yeah, there's got to be an angle.
Always. That's what I used to think. Always.
And, passing the basket. So, and if, I don't know if anybody's ever noticed, but I had a guy pull me to the back one day. This has been probably, I don't know, 7 years ago, 8 years ago. But he pulled me to the back, and he was talking about not coming back to the Koala Club because people watched him and he didn't have money to put in the basket. And if y'all have ever noticed, I rarely put money in the basket. Mm. And this stems from that conversation I had with him. I said, look, here's the deal. I won't put money in the basket. Don't worry about it. You need to worry about coming, getting sober, and that's how we do it, right? Don't worry about that basket. Don't worry about people looking at you. You worry about just coming and getting sober. That's all you need to worry about, right? And so, I thought I can give private donation on the side or whatever, but I even thought the basket was some kind of weird. Since then I've gotten into the finances of the, not just the club and the group, and I understand how all it works, right? But that was just one of those things. Like, there's got to be a catch, There has to be a catch. And then here I am 14 years later. I have a whole completely different life, right? There's people that exist now that didn't even exist back then. I have 4 grandkids that didn't even that didn't couldn't have told you what their names were going to be, you know, and all of that just stemmed from me just well, I kept coming back, even though I didn't understand the angle. You know, there was something about it. I kept. Matter of fact, whenever I walked in, that people say this, and it's even in the big book. At the very beginning of Into Action, I believe, it talks about, you know, when you go into the rooms and you see all of the conversation and the conviviality and the you know, the talking and the laughing, and it's actually at the end of it, but the talking and the laughing and all of those things, I didn't want what you had. I just did not want what you. People would say, if you want what we have, you're going. I don't want
I
what you
couldn't
have.
understand it.
You know, you remind me of the church lady on Saturday Night Live.
Isn't that special?
And I don't want what you have. You know, but I don't want what I have either.
Yeah.
And what I got, you know.
But I think getting to that moment of just what you said, you got to be at a place to where you go, I can't do what I was doing. So like, this is weird. These people are weird. I don't know what's going on here, but they told me to come over here, and supposedly these people can help me. And you got to be willing to stick in there a little bit and keep hanging around those type people. And that's the name of the game, is just going, that was me. I was like, man, this ain't no fun. I don't want to go to, who wants to go to a daggum AA meeting every day? That's what I was doing. I was like, man, like, I got so much better stuff that I could be doing. When in actuality, I didn't. I didn't have nothing, you know?
You know, Mike, I'm going to go off on a tangent right quick, and it's something I appreciate of you and the other people that are in our tight-knit circle. When you was talking about that dude, right, who thought people were looking at him funny because he wasn't putting money in the basket, I'm glad you said what you said, but he also had a point as well. Because what I'm going to say may offend people, you know, I don't care.
Yeah.
But the one thing I do when I sponsor my guys, and Chris and Ben will tell you, is to never think that you've graduated in a program. And what I mean by that is, even now that I'm about to be 8 years in a program, I will still go pick stuff up. I will still make coffee. I will still go pick up plates when people are done eating their cake, and whatever the case may be, I'll still volunteer. I do notice, and I won't say any names, is that some people who may come in the program, you get 1-2 years that you stop doing those things that keep you humble. And I want everybody to know that the only position that you can aspire to be in the program is a servant, because step 12 tells us to give back what we've freely been given and to carry the message. So I do notice that, and the reason I'm saying that is because that has the ability to impede people, especially newer people in the program, when you think or you show by actions that you probably aren't even aware of that you may be better than them, and that may push them away from receiving the program and opening up. So keep yourself humble throughout the program. Keep doing the same things you did when you first came in, because you're not any better than anybody else. And realize that one thought, one slip up could get us right back in the same position of the people that we're helping.
I had
Very true.
I've told this before about Mike, and I won't even give the specifics of the vehicle, but Mike had a real fancy car a while back, just a few years ago. And a guy had been coming in for a few months.
This Mike?
Yeah. And a guy had been coming in for a few months, right? Y'all, Mike keeps some clean wheels, all right? He was looking good, riding in a nice car. But after the meeting, we had the conviviality, and everybody's joking, and we know each other, and we're having a good time, and we like seeing each other before the meeting, after, during. And Mike was with a group of us, and this was back when I smoked, so we're all going out to the front to smoke on the front porch.
You did used to smoke, didn't you?
Yeah, man.
You did.
And this guy had been there a few months, coming in a few months, and Mike walked by and went to his car, got in his car, and he backs out while we're sitting there smoking. And the guy said something to the effect of, yeah, that's real easy to be laughing and joking and having a good attitude when you drive that kind of car. And I looked at him and I said, what time did you get here today? Just right off the bat, I said, what time did you get here today? And the guy goes, I got here at 5:20. And I said, well, guess what? He was here about an hour before the meeting. And I said, when I pulled in, he was there was nobody else here. And I said, he was carrying bags of garbage out to the dumpster. And I said, the coffee you were drinking in there, he made that. Nobody knew he made it. I knew because I showed up early. But nobody would have known that. I said, so quit judging what you think with certain people, you know, by a car they're driving or the way they're doing. You know, this dude is doing the things that we're supposed to do. And maybe you ought to worry about that instead of, you know, and I knew that he hadn't got to that point where, hey, I'm going to, you know, I haven't realized, he hadn't worked a program to realize some of these things, but I just remember that. And I remember going, no, bro, you don't understand, you know, and hopefully he has now, but.
You know what I drove when I got to AA? You know what I had? Do y'all know, you know what a Ford ZX2 is?
Mm-mm.
ZX2?
Yeah.
No, I haven't. No idea.
It's a Ford Escort.
Oh, all right. He made it sound like it was a sports car. He just should have just said that.
Well, it's a Ford Escort, but it's called a ZX2, and that's a little tiny car. You know, roll down windows like that. That's what I was driving when I got to Alcoholics Anonymous. Was that little ZX2? I wonder what happened to it.
I just, you know, that kind of
I
stuff.
gave it to somebody in the program.
But I think people with that judgment of, and it just kind of bounced back to me that this guy's got a long way to go in how he looks at things and that type thing. But you know, he kind of looked at me then. It kind of pissed me off, and I stayed there and talked to him and smoked my cigarette. But you know,
Does he still go there?
I haven't seen him around.
I like what you said. But see that right there. I expect that from people early on.
Yeah.
What I was saying is I don't expect that from people later on.
But I wanted him to grasp that moment and go, maybe I should look around a little bit outside my own area and go, see, I learned to pick up cake plates and things like that from the guy we're sponsored by. And he would go, hey, man, you ain't picking up plates? I'm like, oh, I'm supposed to be doing that? And he's like, yeah, get your ass up, you know? So we pick up plates. We hand out cake. We serve other people in any way we can to facilitate that and help. And, you know, but it took me sitting in there a little bit and a little bit of leadership from some folks ahead of me to go, hey, you know, Randy T's great about it. He'll put you in it. I mean, Randy will be like, hey,
Man,
you're
we
this
lost
guy,
your camera.
you know? Huh?
We lost your camera.
Uh-oh.
It's probably because of that ring.
Because he got that phone call. You can reset. Just take it off the thing. It ain't going to hurt. There, you look at you. Look at
Am I on?
Now you're sideways.
Put it on air mode, like he told me.
Airplane mode. And,
You want me to do it now?
now, you'll probably be all right. Unless it's
I
your
don't-
children
I
going
don't
to
know
keep
who it
calling
is.
you.
They don't call me
For
that
those of
much.
y'all don't know, Matt has about 12 children.
And the only reason they're calling is for money. So that's it.
They all
Money.
they all have cell phones.
You know, it's not a tangent though, because what you discussed, the initial topic, like if I'm doing stuff like that within the club, I'm getting outside of myself. Like,
Yes.
you know, I remember Jerry got all them sayings, but the one move a muscle, change a thought.
That's
if I'm
perfect.
getting up and I'm doing something, I can't possibly think about anything negative that's going on.
Do you know, Cal, and Jerry's been sober for God, what, 30 something?
700 years.
Yeah, a long time.
Hundreds.
But even to this day,
Yeah.
you know, if I'll go home and I'm sitting on my couch and I start feeling self-pity or some of those, you know, feeling sorry for myself or some of those shitty little moves I get into sometimes, people do. I always think about move a muscle, change a thought.
Always.
And I might get up and do something, you know, like that trash has been sitting on my porch forever, or my bed. I've been meaning to put a fitted sheet on my bed, or I've got a load that's been in the dryer for a month. You know, I mean, yeah, seriously. And sometimes I have to go to the extremes, like I go change the oil on one of the cars, or I mean, move a muscle, and it really does change a thought.
That's action, man.
That could be a whole freaking episode of just move a muscle, change a thought. Now, the examples they gave me wasn't very attractive, like mowing the grass or wash the car, you know.
Bobby had me clean my
I'm not
bathroom.
driving all the way up to the car wash, you know, but it works now. All these years later, whenever I get in those shitty little moves, instead of sitting on my hind end right in front of that television, I'll get up and I'll go actually do something. And then I don't even remember what I was feeling crappy about, you know?
That's a perfect example though too, because Mr. Jerry, like 3 days ago, I seen him at the meeting. The dude was changing the coffee pots.
Yeah.
He was moving the trash can. I'm like, this dude's like almost 80 years old, still doing the same thing he did when he first came in.
Life
I
on
love that.
Life's Terms is another one. No, Life 101.
Yep. That's
Jerry
what he says.
used to always talk about Life 101.
And you got to change your people, places, and things. He
Yeah.
say that all the time,
Yeah.
man.
And he's 100% right.
He really is. Yeah.
He and I used to live in the same neighborhood, and I was very early in sobriety. And you don't know, I didn't know a lot about Alcoholics Anonymous except it was anonymous. And if I saw somebody out, I was like, "Ooh, am I supposed to say something to him?" I didn't know what to do. But Mr. Jerry, I used to see him at the dollar store, Dollar General, by our house every once in a while, and I didn't even know if he knew who I was. You know what I mean? But I'd go in there, and he'd, "Hey man, how you doing?"
He know.
Just the same cat everywhere he goes.
Yeah.
And I just went, that's how sobriety's supposed to work. That dude is living, he's an example of living your normal life and being out there, and
Let me tell you how Jerry works. And I know he didn't do it on purpose. He may have, but you be 6 months sober, right? Coming every day, 7 days a week, didn't miss a beat. And Jerry was there 5 out of 7 days every week. Back nowadays, he's kind of cut back. But he was there 5 out of 7 days. And you'd go in there 6 months sober. You'd look up to this man. I put him on a pedestal way up above anywhere I could ever be, right? Mm-hmm. And he'd be like, "What are we going to do about that cracked coffee pot?" And I'd be like, what do you mean? You got to figure out something. We can't have a cracked pot. I'm like, why are you asking me, man? I'm 6 months. But then you'd be like, "Hey, I'll figure it out," So then I would go and talk to the Tinker, the guy. He actually, y'all know Dana, but before Dana, there was a guy named Tinker. And I would go talk to Tinker and say, "Hey, look, the group needs a new coffee pot." I was the treasurer for the group when I was 6 months sober. And but what are we gonna do about that cracked coffee pot? I'd be like, "I don't know what to do about a cracked coffee. I'll go buy one. You mean go buy us a coffee pot? But he would give you these things and make you feel so needed by the group that after a while, Jerry, back off, man. Like back off.
Yeah. He was part of that group of Woodrow and all them for a while there, and that hit me a few years in. There's this whole group of, it was most of them men. There's some ladies in there with a lot of sobriety too that come in, and they're great. But I after a few years, I was sitting there in a meeting one day, and I looked at that row, and it's just a couple of them instead of 10 or 12, and I was like, "Where'd them guys go?" And then I realized we're those guys. We have to fill that service and doing things for others and doing those things that those guys did because that's what we do, So
And we filled the crevasse.
yeah,
I just had to use that word.
crevasse.
But there was a void that, or would be a void in those rooms, and and the newcomers come along and they fill it, and it's amazing to watch. Believe it or not, back when I first got there, Randy was very active in the 5:30. Everything they did, all of our little events. We used to have
He still is.
fundraisers he actually did something.
Oh, well, he didn't delegate.
But he was getting on that cusp, right?
Right.
But Batman, who has, passed away, he was very active in the 5:30 group. And there was just a whole group that are now gone, Dale was the treasurer. And I took over when I was about 6 months sober. Dale passed away when I was 14 months sober, but for 8 months, we kind of did it together, And but it's hard to see, but over the course of time, just who filled in the voids. And we hear all these things in meetings like, well, back when Dick Haddon was here, or back when Herb Wilson was here, or all these people, Kirk Hedrick's dad, I can't remember his first name. Kirk's the guy. Y'all know Kirk comes to the meeting. But his dad was real big, and they all did these things, and they just passed them off to the Randys and the Woodrows and the Docs, and then the Batmans, and then these guys passed it off to to me and you, and it's just amazing how this thing just kind of shifts along over the years. And then you've always got that one guy, Joe. to make sure it happens, I
Yeah,
guess.
yeah,
But he's always been. Joe has never aged a day since I met him.
I think he was that old when he was born.
I think when he was in the 6th grade, he looked just like
He was on his
does
third
now.
marriage, you know.
Thrice.
I love Mr. Joe, man.
But, and we talk about these guys and we talk about these memories. But number one, we wouldn't have any of this had we not kept coming back.
Yeah.
And these are the things that filled that God-sized hole in my life, right? These people, not. I mean, don't get me wrong. A Lamborghini could do a little dent, but Lamborghinis go away, right? Sure. These people, even though I would say 70% of them have since passed, they're still part of what helped fill whatever was missing. And you would go tell them stuff, and they would pick at you and joke at you, kind of make fun, but not make fun. Mm-hmm. And you would know you were headed in the wrong direction. They never say don't. It's almost like somebody saying, don't touch that stove.
Well, they say, how'd that work out for
you? But they would also know that you had a place to go every single day. And they became part of, even the Colonel Jims, who his health, caused him to have to go to another meeting. But these people played a huge role. And sometimes I feel inadequate compared to some of these guys. I don't know much about their personal lives. I actually went to middle school with Woodrow's nephew, believe it or not.
Oh, wow.
And Woodrow's nephew was murdered while we were in middle school.
Gee.
Another kid, they went out, we're talking about like a $20 loan. And the other kid killed him over something like that. And I didn't even make that connection until I read Woodrow's obituary. And that kid, who at the time, he was like a year older than me, 7th grade, I was in 6th. His name was in Woodrow's obituary, or his dad's name. He was a junior.
Yeah.
But I didn't even know we had that connection. It was Woodrow's brother's son. So, and I went to high school with Woodrow's daughters. So, I mean, you have, as far as the man that's, out there, or the guy at work or whatever, I don't know. But as far as the spiritual guy that takes his time out of his day to come to these meetings and tell me it's just his experience and strength, those things filled a really big void in my life. And you'll hear me joke a lot, and I'll say, like, if you go to AA every day, it's like a never-ending Netflix series, But it really was. But it was real live stuff going on, and and unfortunately, we meet people in there, and we see them, and we hear them, and we hear when they get sick, and we hear their stories while they're sick, and then we find out one day they're not with us anymore, and then I'm looking at myself going, so it's up to me to keep this thing going?
Yeah.
Do y'all know who you're talking to? I mean, almost just some really inadequate
I'd been there about a year, and somebody came in with a slip one day and was sitting up toward the front, and they do this occasionally, and they walk in and go, who do I speak to that's in charge? And everybody starts looking around like, we don't know, and nobody's in charge.
Everybody points to Randy.
Because that's because he points at us all the time. He's like, hey, the garbage needs to be taken out, Thanks, Randy.
Yeah, Randy was the master delegator. That's what we used to call Randy.
Yes, and he still is. He has perfected that role.
He was really good about it. He would show up to the intergroups, with 5:30 would be putting on an intergroup, and he'd show up, and I live in New Orleans, and hey, we need drinks. Dude, you're right down the road from a store.
Yeah.
I am 4.5 hours. But you know what? I always said, okay, I'll take care of it. And I would call somebody.
My first time, I've told this before, my first time I'm meeting Randy, I showed up at an intergroup, didn't even know what intergroup was. I'm like 4 months sober. Roll in, don't even know that many people at the club. They're setting up and all that. Randy just turns as soon as I come to the door. He goes, hey, man, can you go get some ice? And I'm like, me? Like, for what? And he's like, this, yeah. And
I remember that, too.
Yeah. Just hanging out and went and got ice. Randy doesn't discriminate. He puts anybody to work. If you're willing, he'll put you to work.
To end off on your topic, the last thing I'll say is it's almost everything is seamless. The work is hard, and it really, I wouldn't say hard, it's challenging. But you go from outside where you have absolutely no outlet at all, and you don't have a way to fight what's going on internally, to accepting, right, to actually learning and humbling yourself to learn in another way, to incorporate it into, your daily routine by practice, because we have to continue to take that daily inventory to knowing what to do. Like, and that transition may take, for me, a couple years, that person 6 months, whatever, but the benefits of it shows itself in the way you live your life at the end, which is what we talked about in all these different individuals in the club, and that's the void being filled.
Yep.
Slowly but surely. And it's crazy nowadays when I go through something, I know I could pray. I know I could call Mike, I could call you. I would have never did that stuff before. And it naturally works itself out. It all starts with accepting another way.
And you learn to take that coaching too and be coachable.
Yeah.
And we were talking about our sponsor. I called him about something really big today. That's the guy I called. It wasn't even nothing related to sobriety. It was a family question about a child, and he's the guy I called because I have 100% faith in him to tell me the correct, as good as he knows, the correct way to do something. I talked to him the other day about something pretty deep, and I already knew the answer before I asked him, but I wanted to ask him anyway, and it was exactly what I knew he was going to tell me. And he last week we were going fishing, and something had been bothering him, but that I had done. And man, he was like, "You got to cut this crap out." And I mean, he just told me, and I was like, "You're right." And he was right, and I didn't take it any other way, but hey man, you got to get better, and I would not have done that previously before coming in here. And I went, yeah, you're exactly right. And so I worked on correcting it, so that's the beautiful thing about this.
God-sized hole is filled with people. For me.
Sure.
Absolutely.
Yes, sir.
Matt, do you know we have 4,478 views on YouTube?
Mm-hmm.
That is insane. We have 10,700 something on Spotify, but 4,000 something views on YouTube. So,
Yes, sir. We're working on 5.
And we did gain a couple of listeners on our since our last podcast. So
We've actually gained about 20 subscribers on YouTube in the past month.
Yeah, I put it out to a lot of people.
Yeah,
That's
I noticed.
cool.
I noticed when you said that it start to climb. So, hey, I do want to give a shout out to
this
somebody.
an announcement?
Yes, this is an announcement. Hit it.
Oh,
So there's a gentleman on Instagram, JCP83 Recovery, and he is a hardcore AA guy. He does a little. He has a group called Sobriety Warriors on there. You can join, and he just does a lot with the history of Alcoholics Anonymous. Really solid little short videos, AA stuff. And I joined his little group the other day. Man, he just out of the blue gave us a shout out on our podcast on his little group that he does, and he's down in Tampa. And just a solid guy. He did some stuff on the history on Bill's sponsor.
Eddie?
And gave a little history on that of who he was. I think that's great, man. I think it's so many younger people coming in and they don't understand the history of what's going on and what. And anyway, y'all, if y'all get a chance, check him out, man. He's a solid guy, really sweetheart of a guy. So
appreciate him.
Yeah, and we appreciate him mentioning us. And he put our podcast link on his group so his folks could look at it. And yeah, so anyway, he always very encouraging, tells us to keep doing what we're doing, and it's important, and just a super nice guy. So y'all look him up and follow him.
Well,
First
thank
time I
you.
heard a guy define someone as a sweetheart, but
Well,
Hey,
I'm just
it's all about attitude.
that's right. That's right.
All right, we've been at Rule 62 Studios right here in Bossier City, Louisiana, and we have been the Grouch and the Brainstorm.